lesson plan that we put together to work with, but we do it very tentatively, as with all our teaching. I think what's important is that sort of how it works, and maybe, what seems to be really working, which we have found with this group, is that I mean, when you get stuck in in a beautiful way, and then we just decide to go with it for a bit longer. So far, each time we run out of time, which is a really good sign, I think. So we've done one, which is the welcome and the permission to record. Very warm welcome to everybody else, people new to this group. I can't see now, but I don't think anybody is. But if you're not sure, then, and also ways of introducing yourself to each other is also through the work we do. So when you work in small groups, please do, if you don't know each other, briefly introduce yourself to each other. We're going to read the entry together of Causality, and then Viv is going to just basically ask, are there any questions for clarification? And we do this plenary. I think last time we did it in the small groups. We're going to do plenary. Then we thought what would be really nice is to, in breakout rooms, to say, okay, well, what is the relevance of causality for your research? Yeah, that's an opportunity to think, okay, do I have to maybe rethink some of the things that I've been doing, or my research design, or maybe your teaching? And then we're going to, share some of these ideas plenary. Then we're going to go back into the breakout rooms and formulate one question for inquiry. We're going to put those on the whiteboard, vote for one, and then have a plenary inquiry. That seems an awful lot to do in 1 hour, so in 1.5 hours. So we'll see how it goes. And so let's just get started. How did we do it last time, Viv? Did we read it?
No, we actually asked for people for volunteers, actually.
Yeah, we did, with the diffraction, yeah. So have we got a volunteer for causality?
I don't mind reading.
Thanks, Hill.
Okay. Causality, this chapter was written by Karin and Viv. Causality tends to be understood as a specific relation between autonomous, isolated, and distinct entities or events, with one causing the other. The entity that leaves an effect or affects the other, marks on bodies, is the cause. The concept is central to empirical research, but most uses of causality assume that the boundaries of systems, objects, or events are already determinate and given prior to the research project. Language constitutes the subject, while simultaneously, in some ways, is external to it. That's Braidotti, 2014. Affect theory reconfigures causality. Inspired by Spinoza, affect is the capacity of bodies to affect and be affected. The intensities and forces that bodies undergo as they encounter each other have their own rhythms, subtle, forceful, but mostly imperceptible, pre-conscious, and always political in their ways of connecting. So that's from Masumi. Agential realists also rework traditional conceptions of causality as relational, thereby even reconfiguring the notion of relationality itself. Causality is not about specific relations between isolated objects and subjects and objects, between isolated objects and subjects and objects. Quantum physics enables us to think of movement, quantum leaps, as not involving a journey from here now to there then. In fact, there is no determinate answer to where and when they happen. Moreover, it is necessary to specify the material apparatus, the agential cut, used to determine the boundaries and properties of the entities that are already always a part of a relational phenomenon. It is the cut that enacts the causal structure of the phenomenon. Causal relations, temporality, and spatiality come into being through both agential cuts and interactions. So, for example, when researching children in a classroom, in an intricate part of the causal relationship between different human and non-human entities is the apparatus that categorizes and identifies themes within the data created. And this includes concepts such as human and child. Never neutral and always political, concepts bring about a particular world in its materiality. The researcher's tools or instruments, for example, interviews, coding software, research questions, are not external to the data. Only by taking account of these apparatuses can lenses such as the social, biological, politic, scientific, etc. materialize. Do you want me to stop, Karin, or should I just go on?
I don't know if do you mind going on maybe to where Viv is diffracting through my writing?
I don't mind.
Okay, lovely, thanks. Unless
It's
people want to stop and have a question, or but otherwise maybe just go on.
Okay. Inspired by Rouse, 2002, Barad argue that intentionality, researchers' intentions, is itself an example of material interaction and not something that people have. In interaction, text, bodies, and time are not separate ontological units acting upon one another, as in a linear understanding of cause-effect relations. And they don't occur between presences, particular space-time coordinates. Barad speaks of causality that is ghostly, but not in the human-centered sense of hauntology. That's Barad 2014. It is better understood by what you see when looking at stars. What is present to the human eye is a phenomenon involving multiple temporalities. Causality as a concept is also intricately connected to other concepts reconfigured by critical posthumanism and new materialism, such as agency, relationality, entanglement, interaction, matter, performativity, diffraction, unlearning, space, and time. These reconceptualizations open up the world's radical aliveness by attributing agency, vitality, and dynamism to complex relational networks of human and non-human entities that have performative power. It is not entities in space and time that cause other entities to, for example, move, but unbounded multiplicities of entities that are always already in relation.
Well, thanks. Should we stop here for a minute? Just to say that here you can see what is underlined. I mentioned this a few times, but just the underlining refers to other entries in the same book. So you have now access to all of these as well if you want to. Not now, some other time. Although we do agency and agential cuts after time and temporalities. So anyone, any questions? Of course, we have an opportunity anyway afterwards. So maybe shall we go on? Anybody else who would like to read Viv's diffraction? I was hoping you would, David.
I don't mind reading. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Karin Barad's work queers the notion of causality. They use the example of a bolt of lightning to show the strangeness of causality, Barad 2012. It is assumed that lightning is unidirectional and continuous, in that it originates in a cloud and is discharged in the direction of Earth. But this is not so. Lightning actually moves in a disjunctured way, both upward and downward, because the ground initiates what are known as upward moving leaders of invitation to the lightning sparks, which are called stepped leaders. The stepped leader is not aware of the objects beneath it until it comes in a close range of them. When this awareness happens, the ground responds, and a spark is initiated from the point to be struck and moves upward to meet the stepped leader, in this way completing its path to the ground. Another example, which Barad, 2012, showed to confound the normative logic of causality, is the clairvoyance of neuronal receptor cells in stingrays. The neuronal receptor cells seem able to anticipate a message which has not yet arrived, as they've been shown to open themselves in readiness to the message. This may be because the behavior of any one receptor cell is disseminated and stretched so that they are here and there at the same time. Astrid Schrader's 2010 research on Phaeosteria piscicida, or killer dinoflagellates, shows how the indeterminacy of the Phaeosteria's beings and doings regarding toxicity challenges conventional common sense notions of causality that presuppose a connection between independent events in linear time. Based on the assumption of discrete atemporal objects existing in space and time, toxicity was thought to exist inside Phaeosteria, rather than being brought into being in relation to certain experimental conditions or environmental conditions that bring it about. She shows how causality and responsibility change in relation to the experimental apparatus used and the temporalities of the objects enacted.
David, so now that we've done the whole reading, I think we should go and ask for any questions of clarification before we go into small groups. So we'll just give you a minute to look over it and see if there's anything you'd like to comment on or ask about.
Viv, what is the relationship between the stepped leader and the spark beneath it? Because I thought it was the stepped leader that invited the lightning attack rather than the spark beneath the...
It's not just the stepped leader that comes down, but it's also the attraction from coming up from the earth. So there are various spots on earth that are reaching toward the stepped leader. Okay. And then what happens is that the stepped leader doesn't know where these things are. And then they just, in an indeterminate way, meet. And there you get the flash of lightning. So it's not just coming down from the sky. It's actually coming up from the earth at the same time. And it's where they find each other.
So you're saying that stepped leaders come both down and up?
Well, I think the stepped leader is what is coming down. And it's just called a leader coming up.
As it says here, the ground initiates what are known as upward moving leaders.
Yeah, upward moving leaders, and the coming from the sky are stepped leaders.
Okay.
So it's not what is coming from the sky that's causing, it is this sort of the yearning, as they put it, happens, and then there's a meeting. The earth is yearning up, and the sky is yearning towards the earth, and there you will get the sparks.
I think that is in Barad writes about this in Nature's Queer Performativity, right? Which
Well,
is the
in a number of different references, one of which is Nature's Queer Performativity, another which is Transmaterialities, and there might even be a third. I think in the recent talks and that sort of thing, where they talk about the Mary Shelley and also the frog legs jumping, there are a number of other examples of this causality that, and the queerness of the causality.
Yeah. Does that help, Hill?
Yeah, no, I just thought the step leader came from the bottom, so it didn't make sense to me. But
yeah,
I mean, it's directly related, of course, to the disruption of unilinear time, and these two examples are really good examples, I think, of that, where the clairvoyance, of the stingray, how already anticipating, which actually I think in teaching is also the case, that very often, there is a
anticipation.
they anticipate something. There is this, it's pregnant, really. There is something going on there, and you anticipate. So it's how you can really look at what happens in a moment in a different way when you think causality differently. They're really nice examples. Well, the 3 examples actually really exemplify that. Shall we go into small groups, Viv, or do you want to say more
I
about?
suppose so, because unless there is a burning issue or question, but you can always discuss that in the small group as well. You might feel more comfortable doing that. So the idea is to go into small groups and to discuss this reading in relation to your own research or what you're currently interested in. And are there any other instructions? Let me just look at it. We don't use a whiteboard or anything.
Not yet, no.
So you just connect the passages of the text with some examples that you're bringing, and that makes sense to you. So we're going to be visiting your small groups as usual. Karin will start at the top. I'll start at the bottom. We might meet in between. But yeah, see you a bit later then.
That was rough, Hillary.
question is there, Karin. It is up there for you to have a look at.
Yeah. I can't see it. Hang on, let me just have a look. So poor Hillary was right at the moment as she was talking. No, I can't see
Maybe
it.
I can only see it because we put it up in the group. The question says, is the meeting of the step leader and the leader the cause of the strike?
Oh,
So I
cool.
think that's a really nice one for the whiteboard.
Are we doing a whiteboard?
I think we are.
Fabulous. Should I put it up now?
Yes, please. We've already got one, and then there was another one in a group I was with. So we can put that one up as well. Did you manage to Zinova? Did you and Sylvia, that group? Did you manage to formulate that question? It's such an important one.
We
Write
did
it
do-
down.
talk about it.
We kept talking about it.
Would you try to formulate one, Sylvia? I think you
Yeah.
were the one who said it.
Hmm.
Maybe if any other groups have formulated questions, they
Thoughts?
could also add them.
I'm just making some shapes and things, and people can just add text where they please.
That's nice. I think Sylvia was talking about round shapes and rather than, I think it was about the linearity of storytelling and of, you know, what happens when, what and how, you know, the challenge to do it differently.
Let's get this to work. Oh, lovely questions. Wow. Hmm.
It's nice commenting with the emoticons. Yeah. Where's that going? Emoticons. Lovely. It's interesting the lines here as well. Hey, of the it's that it's like if we just catching the we. Oh no, it's gone now. Maybe if each group could read out their question. And then if people not quite sure about what's meant by the question, maybe ask questions to that group. Maybe we can start with the one on the right, because some of it is still being written. On the right-hand side with the emoticon there, what causes research?
That was our group. Do you want us to read it, Karin, or?
Yeah, to read it,
Yeah.
and maybe if you want to say a little bit more about what You know, because what would be nice actually, if people just vote which one we're going to start exploring first. So what is it that we might start to talk about and think about when we choose your question?
Elizabeth, you had a good one about data analysis and the taken for grantedness of cause and effect, which I think was useful.
And that's the one about what causes research, yeah?
No, it's a different one from our group that Elizabeth read.
So
No,
David, maybe
You could write it up.
I'm not sure if it was a question more than just a statement about data analysis. Let me
Yeah, but
try to formulate it as a question and I'll write it in here.
in the meantime, David, would you mind talking to that question with the
Yeah, sure.
case?
So I'd written well, there were three others in the group. So George, Charlotte, and Giovanna, they may wish to say things as well. But as we all spoke about our research, we all realized that other than humans had kind of influenced the research and maybe even had agency in it. So we're talking about, pieces of paper or spaces, or in the context of an interview, even the interviewee, what's the agency, what's actually happening in an interview, both human and other than human, when interruptions occur and so on. So we were kind of wondering in the context of research, and that I guess was inspired by Barad's idea of the apparatus and the measurement. I think that's where Barad starts to talk about causality, isn't it? When the scientists measuring the object. And so we were thinking about, what actually causes the research and who or what is actually making things happen in research contexts. That's what we were discussing. But the others may wish to add their examples.
I guess I'll just add that something that I really appreciated was that Charlotte, I saw her not shake her head and say she doesn't want to say anything more, so I'm going to rephrase what she said, but she just kind of spoke about almost like the dot that glows, or the things that caught her attention and then shifted her research, being like what is it called? Sorry, a stepped
Leader?
the leaders from the ground that kind of pulled her, and then that's how we got into this discussion on agency. But that articulation was, I think, really valuable for us. I don't know if Charlotte wants more.
I've just chucked a sweet in my mouth, which is why you do. So in terms of what's happening for me right now, I've got a chest infection, so I've got sweets at the same thing. But just to kind of go back to something George said as well, I realize we're all talking about what everybody else said in our room rather than saying anything that we said. But George was talking about the prejudice. So Karin, drawing upon your work, the prejudice of the hearer. So what issues do we have if we're not open to what materiality speaks, which is what often causes us this view that we're in charge of these things. So if we don't pay attention to, so I was saying that the blank page invited me to research blank pages. So as much credit needs to go to the blank page, whereas a humanist philosophy would say that the blank page is inanimate and useless and didn't do anything. Whereas from a feminist new materialist perspective, I'm able to say, well, actually, that blank page was incredibly agential. So when we think about the lightning from the sky, you only see what comes down. So from some philosophies, you only see the human. Whereas if you disrupt that prejudice, that George was talking about your work, Karin, if you disrupt that, you're able to see and listen and hear from more. George, I don't know if you want to put the article you referred to. It was really... Oh, have you already done it?
Oh, no, I haven't. But it was, I can share it. It was a pleasure.
And then it's extended here or connected to, do humans choose their research topics, or do the topics choose them? So that's sort of, if you go for that question, have a good idea what we might start thinking about together. And the blue group, if you could say a bit more about your question, unpack it a bit.
Is that us? Is it the one that starts with time?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's just my ruminations. Yeah, I'm battling with models to help me out of causality because I do think that time and our interpretation of time is rather linear. And we talk about eternity, and that means from here onwards. So everything that happens in that line is linear and therefore causal. And I was just wondering if I could offer a word called spherism, but I'm not sure that's going to solve the problem from linearism or causality. I've just, is anybody aware of the other term that's not causal, but then I always think, spherical is a solution for me out of causality because, one point can actually cause a lot of other points, but that's still causal. Does anybody have a term? Or are we avoiding it?
Okay, so that would be a question. So we know what your question is. So thank you for that. So people might want to choose that question when we start to vote. So, and then that would be something to investigate together and to come up with some ideas. So then the question, the crystal ball, on the left-hand side is the meeting. Which question? Whose question is that? Is the meeting of the? I suspect that might be yours, Hill.
Which one?
Is the meeting of the leader or not?
No, we
It's
were saying, okay, so it's not the lightning that is the cause. It's not the step leader that's the cause. It's not the leader that's the cause. So is their meeting the cause of the strike?
Lovely. Yeah.
And may I just add something there? It's a very practical thing that I've been told a long time ago. Johannesburg is in the north of the country.
Hang on a minute. Sorry. We at this point just airing the questions and then we can. I'm just worried about time otherwise. Sorry, Nabonke, is that okay? Because we've got more questions here. We've got the left one, the yellow one, causality, effects. Whose question is that?
It's not really a question, it was just a comment. That we talked about it in the room. So no, not a question. I'll just leave it there. It's a pondering.
Okay, I will read it out. Okay, would you mind reading it out though? It's a really, really interesting comment.
Causality, effects, data analysis. How we analyze data matters and makes a difference in the world. If we are constantly looking for cause and effect in data, we tend to reproduce the world. So it's just a little bit of a why causality is important. We were talking about why this is important. Why are we talking about this as opposed to the cause and effect? And what effects does it have in the world? We talked about climate change and we were talking about the butterfly effect. And how does that affect the story of this butterfly effect? How does that work into Brad's causality? So we were very philosophical in our thinking, and we would love to go back and keep talking about it.
But also that important question is it that's what it's doing, right? Is it reproducing the world? And what do we mean by the world?
Exactly.
So there are lots of really interesting questions that are sort of maybe even like the lightning and the step leader. There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. So you can
It
still.
was really about why it matters, I guess, is where we were looking.
Yeah. And then the orange one?
I'll say a few things. I was with Angela and Sinova, and one of the things we were starting to talk about is then how do we write the research, even if the project takes shape in ways that are not working with a linear time. How do we write it when the whole writing suggests a beginning and an end? You go from page 1 to page 10, and so how do we write in ways that are other than linear? And then Sinova had this lovely phrase of that, writing is not enough. And then we thought, well, it's also too much. So if writing is too much and not enough, then how else could we write, or how else could we enhance or think about or present or share or leave traces of the research that are other than the linear, when the whole writing process really tries to put it into a linear, this, then this, then this, then this.
And also you were talking about music there. In the group, and as you're talking, I'm just sort of thinking that musical writing, scores, what would that be like if it's not linear, right? Okay, thank you. And then is there that one about the fossil fuel?
That was us, Hillary.
Yeah, and Mimosa. We're just trying to sort out the subtle difference between causing something, and affecting something.
Okay. So maybe that could be put there also as another, maybe underneath it, because I think that really helps if people choose your question. And in the meantime, shall we go to is that the last one? I think it is, within ethics of care.
Oops, what did I do? Is my audio on? Should I speak to that, Hannah? Don't know.
Yeah, you can speak. That's good.
But it's your point. Would you want to speak to it?
I'm okay.
Well, we were talking about how to apply this to research, there can be instances where it feels like both the people involved are leaning in, that it's not one or the other who instigates an understanding, but there's this kind of finding a way in that sparks, if we can use that word, a powerful sense of mutual understanding. How am I doing, Hannah?
That sounds good. I'll just add a little bit of extra. So this was linked to my PhD interviews, and I'm autistic, and the people who I was interviewing are also autistic, and I felt like there were these when I've gone through the transcripts and listened to the back through the interviews, there's these kind of moments of connection that I had between myself and the participants, and I just thought this was a really interesting way of thinking about these kind of shared moments that we had. And I quite liked the idea of the lightning, like how it was described before we went into the breakout rooms. And it felt very much like that. It wasn't something that I could have planned in advance. But I was saying how having an ethic of care and responsibility and going into the interviews with this openness perhaps allowed for these moments of connection.
Wow, what are we going to do with all these questions, right? So we can only really start with one. Cause versus effect. Cause is unidirectional, effect is mutually constitutive. So that's as put here now as a statement.
Mutually constitutive.
Mutually constitutive within F. Okay, maybe we can, would you mind, George, get some stars that people can use for voting?
Still think, give me a sec. Here we go. How many people are there in the room?
It's funny about light. I think I'm just swimming into another kind of session online, aren't I, George?
How many stars does each person get?
Yeah, maybe 2. Okay, so if people can just put a star with the question that they would like to start answering together. No cheating, not more than 2. And you can put 2 on one, or you can just separate them out, and you can also choose for your own, but better not to put 2 on your own. Would be nice just to give someone else a vote too. Have you been so creative here, George? Was Jewel that wonderful work?
I think it was a group effort.
Oh, all these amazing things like butterflies and fabulous. Hey, how are we doing? It was a bit tricky when there are lots of things really connected.
There are lots of stars outside of the questions in the void.
I think they're not allocated yet.
Oh, I see. So one can just take a star.
Yeah,
from
you can
there.
just take a star. I mean, it looks as if how could writing be other than linear? If writing is too much and not enough, how else could we write the research? But also there's a connection, of course, with the other one, which is, do humans choose, well, what causes research? Is the research or what's being researched or a meeting halfway? But would it be fair to say that oh no, it's also no 5. That is, oh no, that's 4. One of them is sort of outside, not half. Would it be okay to start? More 6. Shall we start with that one?
Sorry, Karin, can I suggest that that the one on the left about data analysis is also about research, and writing is also about research. So there's a real connection between how the notion of cause affects our understanding of research.
And research writing, right?
No, there's research. No, well, everything that's involved in research. It's like the data analysis, the writing up of the research, the choosing of the research topic, how research comes about, are there causes for research to happen? Seems to me there's a cluster around. I don't know if it's helpful to cluster them or not.
The linearity of research ethics as well. So so would you mind writing that up in chat and then we start with that question? You've sort of broadened it, haven't you? Would that be okay with everybody?
Well, I'll just try it.
So it is about the linearity of research. And then it would be great if someone, if we can, and people were talking about their own research and their examples, and that if you want to connect it up with an example, that would be fab. maybe we can go to the main room. Nice. Okay, so we've got our question, how does the notion of cause affect how we do research, that is question, data analysis, writing, care? So if we can, George, would you mind going to the big room? Sorry, without the whiteboard. And of course, we can share the whiteboard with everybody to keep. Fabulous work. So how does the notion of cause affect how we do research, question, data, analysis, writing, care? Shall we start with question, the research question, and how people
Yeah, how they respond to that question. We're not going to go back into small groups, are we? There's no time anyway.
Not anymore. No, I think we can do this in the whole group,
Yeah.
maybe. What do you think?
Yeah, we've got 15 minutes really to respond to that question.
Yeah. So let's start with a research question, maybe. Yeah. So the linearity of the research question, what would it be? And then if we respond to the question that that group asked about the writing, what would it be like if we did research questions differently? Rather than starting with isn't it how it normally works? We have a research question and then or not. How does it work? Anybody?
Not to have an answer, or not the answer, but perhaps an answer, is the sharing in the group I was in that I'm in the writing up stage at the moment and actively tripping up over this issue of what comes first. And so at the moment, I have very generous supervisors. They've always been really generous. They're not at the moment generous. They've always been really kind. But my thesis at the moment has an epigraph, a foreword, a letter of introduction, then an introduction, then a focus of the study, because each of those things are an in, they're not a beginning. And if we, when we talk about interaction, it's an entry point. It's not necessarily this is the start. So I wonder if research questions are not posed as the beginning, but rather an accumulation of thoughts to date. So I wonder if when we do this writing in this way, it's not about start, but at the same time, this is my struggle at the moment. So I'm in my positionality statement because it needs a positionality statement. I'm saying here are all these different things, but you can read them in any way you choose. You don't have to start with this one, but I'm going to be printing something out, and therefore the page dictates that you will start here. So that takes me back to the fact that it's the page that's in charge and not me. Like the written page is very, very effective.
In meeting the universe halfway, sorry, Karin, Barad does say that it can be read in any order, that these chapters are diffracted through each other, maybe with the exception of the equations, which we were reading today, and they said this presupposes, some knowledge of this and that. But I think, the way universities work is that one is required to write these proposals, even research proposals, and to already set the questions out, which are preempting you know, I think it preempts a lot of what might be found, and it assumes a givenness for me. But
And sorry, the why a question when cascading questions are so helpful.
Yeah.
There's something interesting in the chat about this too. So George, if you wouldn't mind sharing that fabulous article by Walter Cohen about beginnings and when do you really begin, and it is about questions, and yeah, and to what extent we do, asked the questions are so-called shaping the research design, but what if we turn this upside down? And then Beth, you were saying, it just occurred to me that we can all approach this question by asking what difference do these phases of research happen if we approach them by asking about how affect is moving through these phases. Maybe you can say a little bit more. That is intriguing. How would that work?
I don't know. But it's just, I just trying to find our habits of starting on the first page or focusing on causality instead of focusing on the coming at it from the new and emerging concept, rather than, it's hard to move away from the.
But this is where the enabling constraints has to step in, right? Like there has to be a moment of, this is the tension that I think Harry says, stay with the trouble. It's difficult to unlearn these conventions. It's really challenging to kind of go against it and then still publish within those conventions. We still have to be able to meet some criteria, right? So it's about recognizing that these are constraints, but they are dynamic, they are enabling, they are the verb constraints, they're not fixed. And it's like recognizing we put these barriers down here and then we could lift them up and you could put them down here and it would be completely different. Katie Strom has a word, and I can't remember the word that she uses. Like, I know I quote the enabling constraints, but Katie Strom talks about something else. That's not helpful. I'm really sorry.
No, it is. It is. Would writing a positionality section be buying into cause and effects? I think that's a question for you, Charlotte.
Sorry, Charlotte, I didn't mean to complicate it further. But I wrote a positionality section, and I argued why I shouldn't be doing it. And I think the way I answered it in the end, because I was circling the same, anyway, it was just circling, going round and round. And I said, eventually we have to use Karen Brad's agential cuts. And that's how I position a research question, but further down. And I went through ethics recently and did not have research question based on this. And anyway, they pushed back, I pushed back. Anyway, we finally figured out that I needed them, but they would change. But eventually, I think we need to make a cut. We need to say, it's the same thing about writing. Eventually, we need to write something. Or do we? We don't need to write. We can do something else, but we need to do something. And then I always kind of work it in my statement in the beginning about the ethics. What does this produce? Why does this matter? What difference will it make? And as long as it's Karen Bradian ethical onto epistemological positioning, I feel it's okay. But eventually there has to be a research question or questions or some kind of a statement. That's how I focused it, Charlotte. Anyway, we can talk about it further, but there you go. Not to complicate your writing any further than it already is.
No, it's already complicated. It's already I'm trying to share an image in the chat, but for whatever reason, I can't do it. So, George, I'll be sending it to you on WhatsApp in a moment, so maybe you can do it. But I pushed back. So I'm adhering to the academic conventions insofar as there's a positionality statement, but each of the headings is referred to as a being rather than a position. So it's not, I'm not here. I'm in this state of constant becoming, and I'm doing a really unorthodox thesis. My thesis is not going to be, I don't think I'll pass, to be honest. because
Depends
of
who
how
the examiners are.
well, if you're offering, Viv.
Yeah, well played, Charlotte. Well played on that.
But yeah, you just have to choose them carefully, right?
It's taken on like a very different, because of my pushback against this, I'm not prepared to accept like this fixed nature. So every time it's very tongue-in-cheek. My thesis is very tongue-in-cheek.
I want to sort of come back to this notion of cause and effect, and to ask, in relation to the research, are we saying then that we must get rid of the notion of cause and effect? Because I have heard that being said by some people. Is that what we're after, or is it a different way of thinking about them from an agential realist position or framework? What is this, George? Is this
Charlotte said this
the
too.
board?
No.
Yeah.
I wonder if the reason why cause and effect are so important is the ethical element of it, because if our actions have consequences, then that gives us, we're entangled with them ethically, and we have to make the right choices, and we're responsible for our interactions. So I mean, what I really like about Barad's writing about causality is that they work in this ethical kind of strand right at the heart of their ontological and epistemological kind of framework. And to me, that's why it's important, because it's about, I mean, I agree with Hilary as well, that there's care there as well in the list of points. Care is in there, i.e. ethics, right? So that's part of cause and effect for me.
In what way, David? Sorry, I just thought I got it, and then
Yeah, I mean, like if we accept that our interactions have effects, then that's that's the ethical element. That's how I had read it anyway. That yeah, some ethical strand to cause and effect.
Angela, would you mind reading that one? You do actually. Oh my word.
Yeah. Sorry, I went off there. I just think I like the way that David was kind of coming from it, because sometimes I think this is a bit easier to comprehend when you come at it from the logic of causality, and then you rework it, which is, I think, what, for me anyway, the brilliance of what Barad did and continues to do. And she gets at this by talking about reproducibility. So we know that there are plenty of, her physics is her field, experiments that are reproducible. We can make these effects over and over again. So what makes that possible? Under what circumstances could that be true if we're still coming from this agential realist perspective? And she makes a really brilliant argument for that by talking about reproducibility. So, and this is from her 2007 book,
Meeting the Universal.
That's the one. Yeah. And it's exactly the way David was explaining it there. And I think it's really good, because I think the fact that we can enact these causal structures makes us accountable. And that's what scientific practices want to remove. They use objectivity to relieve themselves of responsibility. But these causal structures can actually work for us in terms of acknowledging that it could be otherwise, and we're in control of that. And there's not just a brute force acting on the practices that we do, which I think is the abdication that scientific practices associated with this generally try to make.
Yeah, that we are a part of that. We are accountable in being a part of that. And I would sort of equate care ethics with responsibility and accountability. So for me, that, or what matters, is very much part of that. But yeah, I agree that it has to do with this reproducibility, because without a causal structure, you wouldn't get the reproducibility, which is on page 131. I would just had it open there on Meeting the Universe Halfway, where they go into a number of points about causality. So it's not that we want to get rid of it, or that, you know, that it can be got rid of in an agential realist framework.
I agree.
Yeah.
So do you think that that kind of reproducibility works the same way in social science research as it does in the kind of research that Barad is describing?
Well, I think that it did to some degree. Like I work quite a lot with psychologists, and if you speak to psychologists that aren't even qualitative psychologists, they're quite adamant that they can apprehend all sorts of things about you without the need of you really, and reproduce those same effects. In fact, there's a huge push from organizations like APA, so the American Psychological Association, and the British equivalent, about trying to improve the reproducibility of their scientific studies, because in actual fact, they're very clear. Reproducibility is difficult to achieve. So that just makes me smile, because I feel like it it sort of explains what we're talking about here. But I think the part about the cut is the important part, because if I say, you know, that your behavior can be explained by a set of cognitive structures and variables that we just assume a priori are true, if I enact that cut over and over again, I'm going to keep getting that, or some version of that, based on the consistency of the material that meets me.
Yeah, and the apparatus that is being used.
Exactly. So I think it does to some degree, but again, we're responsible for that. Yeah.
We're looking at time and this wonderful work you've been doing. I'm still very puzzled about positionality statements. Maybe that was before my time, and what the heck is that? But I like the image and the mapping, and what's involved in actually saying this person and that person, and of course the need to disrupt that, and how we can do that in different ways. And then Charlotte's point, that's what Bardotti would say, we don't have to get rid of what has gone before. And then the question keeps hovering, you know, that was kind of Sylvia's question about yeah, how do we do that, right? So that the how is continues to be an urgent one. I love the timing there. George, that's going on. Yay.
Very amazing.
Very linear. So, and maybe Viv and George, if you have a little bit of time after this, or maybe we're clocked out as well.
Yeah, I have another meeting, so it could be
Straight away.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so thank you very much. It's just always love these sessions. So see you hopefully next week when we do time temporalities, and actually we can take this forward into the next session, I suggest. So take care. See you then. Could become like a talk show, couldn't it?
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.